All right, Science Flipping podcast listeners, as always, this episode is brought to you by Rocketly.ai. If you're looking for a seller lead generating system that has automation, an AI bot, and has sellers coming to you, then Rocketly.ai is your choice. Make sure you head over to the website, fill out an application, and schedule a demo now to see the power of Rocketly.ai.
What is up, Science Flipping family? We are back with another incredible guest. Super excited about this individual. He has been in the game longer than me, and he still has more hair. He's been in the real estate game for 23 years, well over 1,000 flips done, and the founder of 10X TV. Tony Javier is here. What's up, brother?
What's up, man? Good to be on here finally. It's we've talked about this, I think, a couple times, so it's good to connect and excited to bring some value.
Yeah, man. I'm going to start off by talking to you about marketing first. Actually, let's rewind that. Let everyone know kind of your history in the real estate space first, because I know, but they don't. That led you to create 10X TV, which now is more of a giving platform, a service platform. So talk about your real estate experience, and then how did that turn into 10X TV?
Yeah, absolutely. I love telling the story. So 2001 is when I discovered real estate investing. I was waiting tables and I was in college, and I saw a late night infomercial from a guy named 𝐀𝐛𝐨𝐿, no down payment system. So for those that are a little bit older, probably remember 𝐀𝐻𝐿. Rest in peace. I think he died a few years ago. But he started infomercials on TV back in the 80s. So ironically, that TV thing came back around. And the course taught you how to buy properties with no money down. So I saw the commercials talk about marketing. This guy was a pioneer in marketing. He did these infomercials, and he would have testimonials, and he would have people come on there and say, man, I bought the course, I listened to the CDs, and some of them said tapes because it was that long ago. You got a binder and you got CDs. They had just converted to CDs. That's how long ago this was. And the people would come on there and say, I bought 100 properties. I still own 50 of them. I cash flow $10,000 a month, and I have over $1 million in equity, right? And so that testimonial thing, he had down what they call the credibility factor. He had that a long time ago, and he'd have 5 to 10 people on there talking about their success. And so in my mind, I'm like, I can do that, And so I bought the course. It was April of 2001. By September of 2001, the same year, 5 months later, I bought 2 properties with no money down. And then within about a year later, I owned 10 properties at the age of 21. I think I may have turned 22 at that point. And I had, $200,000 to $300,000 worth of equity. Wow. So at that point, I'm like, holy crap. And those were doing burrs. I would buy them, I would renovate them, refinance, get the cash out, and then I would go buy another property. And I used other people's money doing that. And so that's kind of how it got started. Just bought a course on TV and just started ripping through it. And, a lot of struggles through the last 23 years. The first 5 to 10 seem to be on an upward trajectory. And I think just like any business, usually, about every 5 to 10 years, you have some kind of shakeup is what I've been kind of understanding from a lot of businesses. So about 2010, I had to fire my whole staff within a 30-day period. And so that was like the first thing that like really showed me resilience, because I went through a big depression for 6 months. I'd been growing this company, going up, and I had 4 employees, things were cranking. And then I found out 2 of them were stealing from me. The other 2 were living in my properties. So not only did I have to fire them, but I had to evict them out of my houses. They were threatening lawsuits because, once you start helping people, it just seems like you stop helping them and all of a sudden you're the bad guy and they want to, they want more. And so they, tried to sue me, and obviously they didn't get anywhere with that. And so from that point, I said to myself, I need to do things smarter. Like I was just hiring the wrong people, didn't have systems in place. And so I had lunch with my sister, and I was telling her about everything, and she ran the other company she was working for. And I said, you know what? I need someone like you. If I were to hire you, do you think you could get me to this point? I told her some of my goals, and she looked me in the eye. She's like, 100%. I know I can get you there. And she's gotten me there many times over of what we talked about. So, a couple years later,
your sister, and what does she do? Can I hire her?
Oh man, she's been with me 14 years now. She's managed up to 25 flips at one time.
Oh my God.
Like usually you need like 3 project managers, maybe even more to manage.
Sure. I probably wouldn't do more than like 7 or 8.
Yeah. Yeah. So right now she's managing probably 15 or so. She's got a little more help. She's got a little more help now, but it's mainly her.
Yeah.
So yeah, she was a game changer. And that's probably the first lesson that I can give people is, man, if you can just up your game on the people you hire, like going from, $10, $12, $15 an hour to, that next level, $40,000, $50,000 a year. And she makes way more than that now. But just like going from that, think about it, it's not a lot of money. In my mind at that point it was, but man, she did the job and does the job of 3 people. So that's what really got me to like, okay, I can really scale this thing up. I can really automate it. And within about 5 years, I built the team out. It was actually closer to 4 years. I built my whole team out to where I could step out of the business, move to San Diego, and I only work, maybe an hour a week on the flipping business, and it runs on its own. So in between that,
now that's 23 years in the business, right? I always try to give a little perspective, right? Because people want to be Tony now, Justin now, but in the middle of that, there's learning curves, losses, to your point, people quitting, people getting fired, deals gone bad. So I just try to put some perspective on where you're at today and where I'm at today is not necessarily where people start or even within 5 years. I mean, again, 23 years is a long time, brother. I've done it 17, right? And so, anyways.
Yeah. And things still happen. I mean, I talked to you the other day. We talked, I think the week before. I started a funding business. I'm like, okay, I've got some money to invest now. And so I funded a bunch of deals, a bunch of down payments for real estate investors. And I lost well over $500,000 in probably 10 to 15, somewhere between 10 and 15 deals, and luckily I'm at a point where I could absorb it, but still it's not fun to lose that kind of money.
No.
And things happen, and you're right. There's so many learning lessons through those things. And I always chalk them up. Like when they first started happening back in the first 5 to 10 years, I always looked at issues and said, man, why do I have these issues? And I bet you, like, I never thought anybody else had these issues. But what I figured out is that the issue I'm going through is probably an issue that tens of thousands, if not, hundreds of thousands of business owners are going through or have gone through before. And there's usually a silver lining at the end of it. That's right. So yeah, 100%. There's never going to be a time where you're going to have a long period of time where things are just rosy. You have to take the good with the bad and just take everything that happens that's not good as a learning lesson. Just like when I fired those, 4 people, like I was like, man, I got to start all over. But guess what? I ended up finding better talent. And anytime someone quits now, especially even if they're good, I say to myself, you know what? There's probably someone better out there anyway.
Well, it's funny that you say that because there's a lot of people in the last, call it 4 years, who've been just riding a wave of market wind, right? Like the wind's been behind them. They've become coaches now because they've flipped a handful of deals. They've made a bunch of money. But over the last 4 years, who hasn't made a lot of money? Over the last 10 years, if you've been doing this accurately over the last 10 years, you should have been making a lot of money. The market has been appreciating for over a decade. You're in the right, the market will erase any mistakes because the appreciation has been so high. And especially like markets like Phoenix, Las Vegas, San Diego, Atlanta, Miami, like it's been insane. I'm not saying you might not lose a deal once or twice, but like it's incredible. And then all these little coaches come out because they're some guru because they've done, 25 deals. But it really is because the market conditions allowed them to do that. They haven't gone through the peaks and the valleys yet. And that's what you're talking about is there's never a long enough run. If you're in the game long enough, you're not going to bat 1,000, right? there's no one that wins the Super Bowl with a clean jersey. And so that's something that people need to take note. I say it all the time. Like, if you talk to someone who's never lost money on a deal, then they've done one deal, they made money, and they're going to go brag about it. That's how it works. So, do you want to get inbound motivated sellers calling you and become an authority in your market? Look no further than Tony Javier's 10X TV. Tony has been doing TV commercials to find consistent motivated sellers for over a decade for his business. It is the main reason he has been able to purchase over 1,000 properties. He will use his proven formula to get high quality leads calling you and even setting it up for you. Get in front of 10 times more people, 10 times faster, 10 times cheaper, with 10 times more credibility than any other marketing channel. Surprisingly, TV has little to no competition and can get you a steady flow of motivated seller leads. If you want to see why over 100 real estate investors use Tony to run their TV commercials, go to 10xtv.co to see if there's a spot available in your market. Again, go to 10xtv.co. So how does this trajectory of flipping and building a lending, how then do you go into becoming a marketing mogul of sorts? I mean, you've created 10X TV. You have, how many clients do you have now?
115.
Holy moly, I didn't even know it was that much. And you're essentially helping us, the investors, now, because you know what it's like to be us. You are us. But let's talk about 10X TV. Where did this all come from?
Yeah, it's interesting how things happen. So I'll try and make a long story a little bit shorter. So 2011. So there's many things that happened that led up to it. So 2011, I was supposed to go to this networking event in Wichita, Kansas, where I was born and raised and do all my real estate. And I was sick, and I was on the tail end of it. And I was like, you know what? I really don't want to go to this, but I had someone that talked me into going. So I ended up going, and I met this guy named Brian. So Brian, I ended up mentoring, and we became really good friends. So about 6 months later, he tells me he met this guy named Cody while he was going to Vegas for his wedding. So just by chance, he met this guy. And so he invited me to go to this poker game at Cody's house. So I go down to the basement of Cody's, and I see these two guys across the way. And I was like, my eyes kind of like lit up. I was like, oh man, those guys, I recognize those guys from TV. Those guys have TV commercials. And so that whole celebrity factor kind of like was in my head of like, man, I want to talk to these guys, that kind of thing. So I ended up sitting next to one of them, and his name's Chad. And I said, Chad, hey, I've seen you on TV. I'm an introvert by nature, but I just kind of struck up a conversation. I was like, Chad, what, how are those TV commercials doing for you? And I just thought he would say, you know what, it's branding. We spend a bunch of money. We don't make a lot, whatever. And he just looked up at me and he goes, dude, we absolutely crush TV. He said, he owned a construction business. He said, we do millions of dollars a year from TV commercials, and that's all the marketing we do. And so I started picking his brain on it, and he goes, you know what, you need to reach out to my guy named Drew. Drew's the one that helped me. Maybe he can help you. It may be good for your business. I don't know. Why don't you talk to him? Monday morning, I called Drew, and I said, hey, Drew, I heard you're the TV guy. Tell me about it. He said, well, tell me your demographic. And so I go through everything, and he says, you know what, I have a pretty good feeling of what kind of shows you need to be on. He goes, let me go to the stations. I'll negotiate some rates for you. I'll bring it back to you. And if you feel like it's good for you, then we can produce a commercial for you. So he comes back to me and he says, for $3,000, I can get you, it was like 300 commercials. It was a lot of commercials for a small ad spend. I was expecting to say it was going to be $5 to $10,000 and we'd get 100 commercials, that kind of thing. So I wrote the scripts. I kind of helped format the commercial. He edited it. He had a production team, and we shot it together. And the first month I spent $3,000, I made $35,000, and I was just off and running from there. So from 2012 to 2001, it was our best lead channel by far. 2012 is when I first aired, and no one was on TV. Like, I think I had Homevestors that maybe was kind of off and on the air a little bit. And throughout the years, I just kept telling people, like, TV's my best lead channel. And people, and almost every single investor I talked to, even up to about 3 years ago, was like, I don't know anybody in my market on TV. And a lot of people were like, I don't know anybody doing TV. In fact, I joined Collective Genius back in 2015. Brad Chandler, I don't know if you know Brad Chandler and I were only two doing TV out of 100 and some real estate investors in that group. And so fast forward to 2000, it was 2000. So COVID hit and everybody was online doing stuff. So I created this online mastermind for some real estate educators. And this guy had created a product in a marketing niche. And he said, you know what? I bet you if you taught people how to do it, it would work well in other markets. And I kept pushing back because I was like, man, I don't really want to take anything else on. I just downsized my company. We were right sizing and I was kind of taking it easy and that kind of thing. And so after about 3 or 4 conversations of him saying, dude, you would crush it, I went to my media guy, Drew, and I said, hey, Drew, if I were to show people what I'm doing all over the country, I was like, I could probably call 10 people tomorrow that I know that would do TV. I said, would you do the negotiations like you did for me? I know the scripts. Over the last 8 to 9 years, I have tried so many different scripts and I know what works well. And we've tried different things with our commercial. We basically kind of have a franchise-like system where we've tested it enough that if we plugged it into another market, there's a pretty good chance it would work. And he's like, absolutely. He's like, I've been doing TV commercials all over been doing ad buying for TV commercials all over the country for 20 plus years. It's easy. And so I called 10 people that I knew had big enough businesses and could afford it and that I thought would do well with it. 8 of them said yes. So produced 8 commercials for 8 different investors. And I think 6 or 7 of them, almost 4 years later, are still running with me today. And it did the same for them. Just right off the bat, just started crushing it. And so I said, man, we've got something here. So I started, promoting it, going on podcasts, just networking with other people. And it's just taken off like a wildfire. Once you get someone that gets results, they're in mastermind groups, they're, talking to other investors, and it just spreads. So yeah, like I mentioned, we have 115 people that we license our TV commercials to around the country. They get to be on the commercial. They get credibility for the branding. Just like you posted in Facebook today about branding, like TV is the number one thing. I don't think anybody can really dispute that. The number one thing you could do to brand your business, because it's been around the longest. People, when they think you're on TV, they think you're spending tens of thousands of dollars a month. They know that if you're on TV, you can afford to be on TV, which means you're probably a legit business. It's kind of funny. We don't usually take on new investors, but if we feel like someone could do well with it, we'll get them started with TV. But we had a new investor go on TV, and the comments that he was getting from people, like his friends and family and people that he would go on seller appointments to, like they were treating him like a king, as if he had made it. You know what I mean? Yeah. He had really just started the real estate journey. So there's this perception when you're on TV, just like when I went to the basement of Cody's, that like, if you're on TV, it's like that celebrity factor of like, man, this guy is cool. This guy's credible. I can trust him. And just something attracts you to people when you're on TV, just like, the Kardashians, just like anybody else who has become famous from TV, that there's just something about being on TV that people are drawn to and really makes them think differently of you.
There is no doubt about that. Not that I ever get that way with people, but I will literally have friends that we'll be eating at dinner and they'll point out a reality star like that I've never heard of. Bro, that's so-and-so from the selling houses. And I'm like, that doesn't mean he's famous. He's just doing his job like he normally does. And there's a TV guy following him. Like, but I don't buy into that. But that's a me thing. It means most people do. Like the vast majority of people, I would say 99%. But it brings the credibility. Let's talk about my post today, right? Just had this conversation. I'm obviously trying to reply to everyone as I come. There's in my opinion, there is a difference, and there's a reason there's a difference between marketing and branding. And I don't believe enough people put focus on branding, in my opinion. Now, you've replied to this post, so I don't know what you said yet. But what did you say?
Yeah, so basically I said that's why I put so much time and energy into TV commercials, not only for myself, but other people. there was a gal that worked for me back in 2000, I want to say 5. And there's 2 things that she tried to instill in me, and it took me a while to get it. She told me I needed to build relationships with local banks, which it took me years to do that. And now, it's really opened up the floodgates, and we've got tons of lines with local banks, and we can buy about anything we want at this point. And the second thing is branding. And at that time, I was like, I'm a real estate investor. I don't need a brand. I'm just gonna market to the people that need to sell, and I don't really need to brand. And so what I found is that with TV commercials, your post said something of the effect of people market, but they're not really good at branding, right? And so there's 3 things that I said. One is TV is great because it's branding and marketing. And it's not just, when I thought about TV commercials, I thought it was just branding. When I saw these big companies, and for some it is, for, the big cereal commercials, for those companies where you go and you buy their products, it really is branding. But when you have something like real estate investing, real estate sales, home service companies, you can get them to directly respond to you from your commercials and not only brand yourself through those, but make money very quickly. And that's one of the reasons that TV works very well for real estate investing, is that it's a high dollar item, right? People are selling their house, and one call today could make me potentially $100,000. I mean, my average profit is more, $35,000, but
Sure.
Yeah, you've made over $100,000.
You're in Wichita, Kansas. So,
yeah, I'm in Wichita, right? So
that's
yeah.
right.
So 35 to 50 is still a good profit, but we've made over $100,000 on TV deals in Wichita, Kansas. So if you have something that's high dollar or like a high ticket item, or something that's highly profitable, like surgeons. I mean, you've seen accident attorneys. They could make $1 million on a case, right? And so they don't mind spending all that money on TV because
100%.
it just takes one case to pay for 2 years probably worth of ad spend, right?
That's
or
right.
3 or 5 years, right?
That's one case.
One case.
And same thing in real estate, right? And we won't get into how much all. I want you guys all to go. Do you want them just to go to the website, by the way, Tony?
Yeah, 10xtv.co is where you can get them.
10xtv.co. All the links are in the comment section below. Tony Javier's, social media. Follow him, but also 10xtv.co. What are your handles on Instagram and Facebook and all that? Where can everyone find you?
Pretty much anywhere you can search TonyJavier.tv. So Instagram is TonyJavier.tv, and YouTube is Tony Javier TV.
And this will all be in the links below, so you can find that there. Now, you just said something like you could go do a $100,000 real estate deal, and that'll pay for sure, unless you're excessive, I would guess, the whole year of your TV ads, right? Unless you're in multiple markets and going bigger. But like if you're in a Wichita, Kansas, Tulsa, Oklahoma, whatever, I would assume that $100,000 deal pays for your entire marketing budget for the year.
Yep. And I'll let me finish my 2 thoughts on the branding as well.
Oh, yes. Ooh, I want to keep going back with that. Yeah.
And we'll circle back to this. So the other 2 things I said, and I've seen this because we've worked with so many investors now that we now part of what we do for our investors is not only do we get them on TV, but we help them with their business. We help them dive into their other marketing. In fact, here in about an hour and 15 minutes, we're doing our fractional CMO call. So a lot of people, they market, but they don't have anybody to really come to really dive into their marketing. So we do a monthly call with our clients that could come in, and we'll analyze their marketing. And what I found is the ones that are doing the best are the ones that do 2 things. One is they make everything cohesive. So if I have a TV commercial, if they hear me on radio, they see my billboard, they go to my website, they are going to know that all of those are me, right? Too many investors will do something different for postcards, then do something different for TV, and then do something, and all of their marketing is different messaging. It's potentially different logos. It's just a lot of different things that when you look at, if you put 5 things together, you might know that 2 of those are them, right? So I think that's a big thing, is making everything cohesive and look the same.
Mm-hmm.
And then The other thing is that they're omnipresent. So even if you don't really focus on branding per se, if you're in enough places, your brand is going to be all over the place to where people are going to know that it's you. So I mentioned some of those things already, but we are all over the place. If someone turns on their TV, we're on their TV. If someone is in their car listening to the radio, they're going to hear us on radio. Someone's driving down the street. We own a billboard on a major highway. Tens of thousands of cars go by there every single day. They're going to see our billboard. If they Google, they're going to go and they're going to see us. We're going to be on the Google paid ads. We've got search engine optimization. We're the top 1 to 3 in almost every single search term. We have our Google business listing that if they Google us, they're going to see that we have over 100 5-star reviews on Google. If they're on Facebook, they're probably going to get our Facebook ad at some point. If they, I'm probably missing 1 or 2, but you get what I'm saying. Like, we are everywhere. And some of those don't even make money. So Facebook, for instance, we've never really made money on Facebook. We've broken even. I think our best year might have been a 2 times return to 3 times return, which is kind of the metric of the bottom of where you want to be from a return from marketing standpoint. But we spend money on Facebook because we know that that's just another touch that they are going to see us, that if they see our commercial, their TV commercial, they hear our radio, that 5 to 10 or 15 times or however many times they see our Facebook ad is just instilling in their mind that we are the ones to call. And then last thing I'll say on that is I know that the branding's working because we get referrals all the time from people and we don't know like where they came from. And for a long time, I was like, maybe a friend told them about us, but then I started realizing I think people are seeing our commercial. And then when someone says, hey, I'm looking to sell my house, those people have seen our commercial enough. They're like, hey, why don't you call that Professional Home Buyers from TV? Like, I see their commercial all the time. So yeah, there's so many different, benefits of TV from the branding perspective, from the return perspective. And then once you start pairing it with everything else, we realized that once we started getting other investors on TV, we started seeing the same thing that we were seeing, is that all of their other marketing started to improve as well. So postcards, like for instance, a seller can get, 5, 10, 15, 20 postcards at one time because a lot of people are mailing to the same list. But we have seen that people will call us and only us from that stack sometimes because they'll say, we've seen you on TV and we know you're credible, whereas we don't know who these other people are. And then when we started getting other people on TV, other people started saying the same thing. So many different things that make a great marketing campaign that investors and just businesses in general, I think, miss the mark. But if you can omnipresence market and get everywhere that you can, and then make your marketing cohesive, if you give it enough time, it's going to produce. And that's the last thing I want to touch on before you circle back around is, when people say direct mail didn't work in my market, or they'll say whatever didn't work in my market, there's usually 2 things that don't work. No, I'm sorry, 3. 4. One is they didn't give it enough time. They didn't spend enough money. They didn't do it the right way. Or they did all of those and their sales process sucked and they couldn't convert the leads. So if you can do all of those things, there's no reason a marketing campaign can't work.
Did you say time in there, by the way?
Time. That was the number one. A lot of people after 3 months or even a month sometimes, they're like, we only got 5 calls this month. Well,
right.
It's the first month. Sometimes it cranks the first month and sometimes it takes 3 to 6 months for it to start rolling.
So TV is probably the only platform I would make the same argument as you. I'd support your argument is it's probably the only platform that I really believe does encapsulate the true marketing component where you can track your KPIs. It's lead gen specific, but it creates a branding platform for yourself where cold calling doesn't necessarily do it. Direct mail doesn't necessarily do it. Google pay-per-click can to some extent, but the person's not being branded per se, right? The company is being branded, right? And so I think TV, for anyone out there listening, if you're doing any level of business, because Tony doesn't take on newbies per se, if you're doing any level of business, you need to go contact Tony directly. You go to 10xtv.co just to have a conversation, because I'm a firm believer, and it's because of my own data, meaning Tony is here today after I've been doing this podcast for 11 years. He's been in this space, and I've known him for probably most of those 11. I mean, we've known each other or of each other for quite some time. But today he's on because I've turned this really into a business after 11 years of buying myself enough time to reap the reward, right? And to your point, 5 calls isn't enough time, and people give up too quickly. TV gives you the platform to brand the person and the company simultaneously. And I think that's very, very unique, because so many people care more about, in some of the responses, and some of the people, but like they care more about the marketing because it's a direct correlation to return on ad spend, right? Revenue. But what they're not really thinking, because they're not thinking in the macro, they're thinking more in the micro, immediate returns on ad spend, is what can happen. How much more money can I make? Because people, like in your reference, people are telling people about. There's no actual ad spend. Someone else saw the ad. They're telling their friend who's in a tough financial situation about us because they saw it. I didn't spend any money on this person, but I got their home. The person that saw my ad's not selling their home, but I got their home instead. Technically, I'm not spending any money on that person because I didn't even see the ad, right? They're not thinking that way. They're not thinking about word of mouth. And the other thing that you kind of mentioned is, and I talked about this before, but it's about delivering what you say you're going to do in the marketing, right? If I go out and say, Tony, I want to use 10X TV and I want Justin buys houses, I need to buy houses. Like, I don't get to walk around and cancel contracts all day long like some of these younger investors are doing all over the city, right? I need to perform, because if I do that, then word of mouth starts to go again. The brand of Justin buying houses grows. And then my personal brand, to your point, there's this some of D-level fame that comes along because Justin's on the TV saying, hey, we buy houses fast, for cash, no headaches, no commissions. Does that make sense? So TV is really the only platform I really believe encapsulates both marketing and branding.
Yeah, you mentioned something that is a good point too, is the personal branding. So, there's another company that approached me a long time ago, and they wanted to brand themselves and then send me the leads and me pay for the commercials. And at that point, I wasn't even thinking about TV, so I just kind of brushed it off. And that is one of the, probably, I don't want to say the biggest, but like that is a huge factor in TV commercials is the personal branding. Because think about it. If you're raising money in your market, so I get referrals from our investors locally, and when I'm on a call with them, the referral, they're like, hey, Dave told me about you. He said he's getting good returns. I'd love to talk to you about your program. He's like, and they say, I've seen you on TV throughout the years, so I kind of pretty much know what you do. Just give me the run, and it's usually just a quick conversation. Oh, yeah, we buy property. What we do is we, here are the numbers. Here's typically what we need. We pay our investors monthly. We pay, 10% return. And usually they're just like, all right, let's go. Send me your next deal. Right.
Yep.
And before I was doing TV and I was getting those referrals, I would have to dive much deeper. I could tell the conversation totally changed. And it's the same thing with dealing with contractors. It's the same thing when you're dealing with other realtors. It's the same thing when you're dealing with any kind of vendor. It's just they treat you differently. And, you just get things, not quite like a celebrity, but there are people that will contact you and give you things because you're on TV and they just want to earn your business.
Now let me ask you a fun personal question. Did you get 10X from our boy Grant Cardone?
So interesting enough, people ask me all the time, are you affiliated with Grant? And so people think that Grant Cardone is the one that came up with 10X TV, or 10X rather. It was, do you know who it was that came up with the 10X?
Benjamin Hardy.
It was Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan.
They wrote the book together. 10X is better than 2X.
Yeah,
Dan
exactly.
Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy, right? So they're co-authored the book.
Yeah. So Dan Sullivan, even before he knew Benjamin Hardy, had coined that term many years ago. So I actually did his strategic coach, and it was pretty much the same exercise when you would go into the room and he would teach that. he would basically say, if you try and double your business, you're not going to make big enough decisions and big enough changes to get to 2x. And even if you do, it's only 2x. But if you think 10x, you're thinking much bigger, and you have to make much smarter moves to get there. And you're probably going to work smarter because you know that you can't 10x the business by yourself. You're going to have to get some bigger resources, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how the 10x started with Sullivan. And then, so the way that we came up with 10x TV is I actually had a mastermind called Real Estate Masters, which I only do for my clients now. I don't market it publicly. And so when I started the TV program, I just called it Real Estate Masters TV. And then eventually we were testing some language. No, actually, I'm sorry. The way 10X started after that was we were getting results from our first 20 clients, and we had a lot of people that were getting 10 times return on their money. So they were spending $5,000 in their market per month, and they were making $50,000 to $100,000 per month. And so 10X TV just kind of like started flowing off the tongue a little bit. So I was like, let's test that on our website. So we put 10X TV on part of our website, and it converted better. So we just changed the name to 10X TV. And the other reason we changed it to 10X TV is because not only do we do TV commercials for real estate investors, but we also have 100 clients outside of TV that we run commercials for as well. So doctors,
outside
attorneys,
of real estate,
med spas, accident attorneys.
I was going to ask that. So anyone listening to this really can be using your service, right? Whether it's for real estate investors, whether it's attorneys, dental practices, they can all use your service. It's all the same, again, system, process, right?
Yep. If it's my suggestion, though, it's really, it can work for most businesses, but it really probably needs to be a high ticket service. So like I said, people that are selling $5,000 to $10,000 roofs that are high margin, sure. HVAC contractors, attorneys, those types of things. I had someone at an event one time came up to me and said, "Hey, what do you think about me selling urns for dogs that died?" And I'm like, okay, that's where I kind of draw the line.
Yeah, probably not the ticket.
Market urns for dogs that have passed away.
Were they joking, by the way?
They were dead serious. And I respected the question because it's like, you may as well have the conversation. But when you think about it, it's like you have to sell a lot of those in order to make money. Whereas with real estate investing, like you said, you sell, you flip one house and you paid for anywhere from 3 to 12 months worth of ad spend.
What's the range of ad spend that most of your clients will, in the real estate space specifically, because I know you have other clients, but in our space, what's the range? Because you can spend a lot, you can spend a minimum. What's kind of the minimum threshold, $3,000-$5,000? And then what's the most you've seen?
Yeah, I would say most markets. And when I say most markets, like a Wichita, Kansas, I don't know, Lexington, Kentucky, those towns that you've heard of, but they're not huge. 5,000 to 7,000 usually gets like anywhere from 300 to 700 commercials a month. I mean, we know how to buy, we know how to buy the cheap spots that go a long way. And that's why we get so many spots. So that's probably the low end. There are some really small markets where $3,000-$4,000 is all we can spend, and we'll get 1,000 commercials. And, there's no reason for us to spend any more money. But there are some bigger markets where 10,000 may be the minimum ad spend. And then
like in Miami, you'd probably say you got to go 10,000 minimum in a Miami.
Yeah, absolute minimum 10,000. That's a much bigger. Yeah, because if you look
Phoenix,
at the map,
I'd probably argue the same.
Yeah, Phoenix is going to be more. Yeah, because Phoenix covers all of Arizona.
Ooh,
and
got it. Yeah.
And so we have most of our clients are between probably 7,000 to 12,000, because even if someone starts at 7 doesn't mean they start there, or even 5. Usually they kind of start ramping it up.
Yeah.
Our biggest client, actually our two biggest clients, interesting enough, San Francisco. So you're from San Francisco?
I'm from San Francisco. RIP, my guy Willie Mays just passed, so I wanted to bring it on out.
I was thinking Barry Bonds for some reason, but I guess that's...
Well, he was 25, so Willie Mays is 24, Barry Bonds is 25, but got to respect the great.
Yep, absolutely. So when I first launched this program, I would say probably 6 months in, someone contacted us and said, "Hey, I've been tried TV on my own. I'm spending $10,000 in San Francisco, and I'm not getting any results. So we went through our whole formula, and literally there were probably at least 10 things that we found that were wrong. He was buying on the wrong stations, the wrong shows. His call to action wasn't clear and concise. His phone number wasn't easy to remember. His website was way too long. The actor that he hired was way too out there. I mean, there was just like so many things wrong. And so he switched over to us. And long story short, we got him up to from $10,000 to $150,000 in 5 different markets. So he took what we did in that market, expanded other markets. A lot of our I don't want to say a lot, but quite a few clients have done that, where they'll dominate one market and then they'll start another market, whether that's them doing it themselves or partnering up with somebody else and kind of splitting the ad spend and that kind of thing. So to answer your question, 7 to 12 is what most of our clients are at, but we have clients that are upwards of 70, 80, 100, and our biggest client is 150,000.
Jeez, man, that's phenomenal. Now, so the obvious question I think most of the listeners would want to ask you, but I still want you to go talk to Tony, would be, can you take more than one client in a market?
Yeah, so I set this up like I would want it set up. So the first thing I did was I didn't want my brand in there. I wanted Justin or whoever was going to come on there to be branded. Just like I got that benefit, I wanted our clients to get that benefit. So they're in the commercial. And then when we went into other markets, one of the things I heard from like home investors, which sounds like they're kind of on a downward trajectory, but one of the things they did is they just oversold markets. They would go in and they would start a market and they would say there's only 3, 4, 5 spots, whatever it was in a market. And eventually they'd have 20, 30, 40 people in a market. And don't quote me on that. I'm just, hearing from other people that bought into the franchise. That was the issue. So what I know is that any market can sustain probably at least 5 people on TV, because when I got on TV back in 2012, I was the only one on TV. And eventually as time went on, and especially now that I'm talking about it publicly and people see me on Facebook in Wichita, we've had some competition. And so we've had up to I'd say at least 4 or 5 other people on TV at the same time. And we've still performed from that in a small market. And so what we did was, we don't want our clients to feel like we're just, blowing up a market and they're going to get out competitioned. So we do 2 to 3 people per market. So it depends on the size of the market. So the bigger markets, we do 3 spots. The smaller markets, we do 2. And if it's really small, then we may do 1 person. But the thing about TV is that the amount of people that are on TV compared to the population is way different than those that are texting and cold calling and sending postcards. Because if you think about it, if you have, let's say, even 5 people on TV in a market that's 500,000 population, and 500,000 usually includes the main market and all the surrounding areas, because TV goes pretty far. That's 1 person per 100,000 people that are marketing on TV. But if you take that into perspective, if you go and you find people that are cold calling and texting, you may have dozens. And the problem with that is they're probably hitting the same lists, right? So TV can be pretty broad. And so I'm not too concerned with oversaturation of TV. And the other thing about that is, like I said, we've had 4 to 5 people at any time compete with us, but they don't always last, because it's either, like I said, they weren't spending enough money, they weren't doing it right, they didn't give it enough time. So when people come to me and they say, hey, I want to do TV in my market, but I have 2 other people doing TV, no concern whatsoever. And usually I ask them, like, how long have they been on TV? And usually it's not very long. And chance of them sticking around for the long term is probably pretty slim.
So what would be a message that you would want this audience to know? First, go follow Tony. Go to 10xtv.co right now. But what would you want the message to be heard from what we've talked about today? Like, what's a big takeaway that you think needs to be echoed?
So I'll start from the high level perspective, and I think it's just think smarter. In your business, it took me a lot of pain and a lot of years to start working smarter. So the first 10 years of my business, 9 to 10 years of my business, I didn't hire good enough. I didn't have good enough systems in place. I wasn't thinking big enough. I was doing too much of the business myself, and I got burnt out. And luckily, I had enough resilience to get through it. I think there's some people that probably would have thrown in the towel and said, this is too much. So looking back at what I know now, people ask me that all the time. Like, what would you do going back 23 years ago? If you could tell yourself, a couple things that you would do starting out, what would you do different? One would be is join a mastermind like Boardroom that Justin runs or something of that nature, get support or coaching or something of that nature, or a mentor. Start TV commercials as soon as you can. And I want to finish with a story on commercials early on. Just think about, we talked about Dan Sullivan. He has the book 10X is easier than 2X, but he also has a book, Who, Not How. So instead of saying, how can I do something, who can I find that has the answer for what I'm looking to put in place, or better yet, who can do it for me? Mm-hmm. So I mentioned to you before we started, before you hit record, that I'm looking to buy businesses, and I'm not looking to run them myself. I'm looking to find a business that is mostly self-sufficient, and then I can take someone from my team and say, hey, we bought this business, put your finger on it, and I'll be in there a little bit, meeting with them and that kind of thing. But my point is just how to think, even if you're a small business, think like a big business, and what a big business, how a big business would think. Who can I put in place? What systems and processes do I need to have? And how can I think bigger? And then I'm going to finish with a story real quick. So 2005, so this was 4 years in business. My mind, for some reason, thought of TV commercials. And so I called NBC, I called one station, and I said, hey, I'm just curious, how much would it be to get on TV? So I get in touch with this representative, and they gave me the same ad spend, $3,000, but they only gave me like 30 commercials. It might have been 50. It was like 30 or 50. It was something like that. And if you remember what I said, when I had the right person in place doing it for me, they could get me 300, and they could spread it among, it was at least 3 stations. It might have been 4. So they produced the commercial themselves. I'm not in it. They just have my generic logo. I had a crappy logo at the time, and they had the worst commercial. And so I ran it for 3 months. And at the end of 3 months, I hadn't gotten a deal. And I'm like, at that time, 3,000 was kind of a lot. And so I stopped. Right when I stopped, I got a lead where I made $10,000. So I was profitable, but my mind was still like, I don't want to take the risk and keep going. And so the same thing happened to me where I wasn't doing it right. I might have been spending enough money, but I wasn't spending in the right places. And yeah, I just didn't give it enough time. And so I think to myself, what would have happened if I would have, in 2005, kept doing TV commercials and stuck it out? 7 years worth of TV commercials, I probably lost out on millions of dollars. So sometimes you can be right there on something. You just have to get a little more time and energy.
What's the book? 3 inches to gold, or 3 feet to gold? It's true. And that's why you always got to give yourself runway. And that's why, as I coach and mentor and lead people in our space of real estate, you got to give it time, right? I started this podcast saying, don't try to be Tony, the version of 23 years of real estate. Don't try to be Justin, the version of 17 years. You got to go. You got to get there. You got to earn those stripes, right? So, dude, this has been a blast. You and I could talk marketing and branding for days right now because it's just heavy on my mind, and you're an expert at it. But I want everyone to go follow Tony Javier, obviously, on all social media platforms, and .tv, and then also go to 10xtv.co. So thank you very much, my brother, for coming on. Excited to have this and excited to see the journey with you, dude.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
All right, y'all, that is it for this episode. We are going to bring you another killer episode with another awesome guest. I will see you guys later. If you got anything out of this episode, make sure you share